Thanks for listening to the Family Bible Journey podcast, where we are leaving the legacy of faith by journaling through the Bible. This is episode 255, season 1 of the Family Bible Journey Old Testament podcast. Today we're looking at Ezra chapter 6. The title of today's podcast is Go For It. And our key verses for today are chapter 6, verses 1 to 12, where we read, Then Darius the king made a decree, and search was made in Babylonia, in the house of the archives where the documents were stored, and in Ecbatana, the capital that is in the province of Media. A scroll was found on which this was written, a record, in the first year of Cyrus the king. Cyrus the king issued a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be rebuilt, the place where sacrifices were offered, and let its foundations be retained. Its height shall be 60 cubits, and its breadth 60 cubits, with 3 layers of great stones and 1 layer of timber. Let the cost be paid from the royal treasury, and also let the gold and silver vessels of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that was in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, be restored and brought back to the temple that is in Jerusalem, each to its place. You shall put them in the house of God. Now therefore, Tattenai, governor of the province beyond the river, Shethar-bozenai, and your associates, the governors who are in the province beyond the river, keep away. Let the work on this house of God alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews rebuild this house of God on its site. Moreover, I make a decree recording what you should do for these elders, for the Jews, of the rebuilding of the house of God. The cost is to be paid for these men in full and without delay from the royal revenue, the tribute of the province from beyond the river, and whatever is needed, bulls, rams, or sheep for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, or oil, as the priests at Jerusalem require. Let that be given to them day by day without fail, that they may offer pleasing sacrifices to the God of heaven, and pray for the life of the king and his sons. Also I make a decree that if anyone alters this edict, a beam shall be pulled out of his house, and he shall be impaled on it, and his house shall be made a dunghill. May the God who has caused his name to dwell there overthrow any king or people who shall put out a hand to alter this, or to destroy this house of God that is in Jerusalem. I, Darius, make a decree. Let it be done with all diligence. This is the word of the Lord. Our key verses today end with some pretty hard words from King Darius that not only should the rebuilding of the temple be allowed to continue, but that its cost is to be paid out of his royal treasury. He even issues an edict to the men who formerly had opposed the rebuilding of the temple and charged them with making sure that everything that was necessary for the rebuilding and the regular sacrifices there at the temple be provided at the king's own expense, so that the priests, the Levites, and the people of Jerusalem and Judah would pray for the king, for his sons, and that the kingdom would prosper under the blessing of the God of heaven. And then we get to the very end where it talks about impaling those who would oppose this work or seek to subvert the edict of the king. And this is something that apparently for this particular government at this particular point of time was a rather common method of public execution, so that people would learn from the poor example of others as their houses were reduced to rubble, as the offenders were impaled on the beams of their own house and left out there publicly as a testimony to people not to oppose the will of the king. Well, this very harsh punishment is levied against anyone who would oppose this edict and oppose the work of rebuilding the house of the Lord. And what we see happening after this is that the temple is finished and it is dedicated. And the people who had been prohibited from worshiping in the temple now for decades, as it was first destroyed and then under construction for a couple of decades, at least, according to my estimation, they are so ready to celebrate the beginning of a new year with a temple in place, a temple dedicated, that when it comes time to celebrate the Passover, all of the Jews, the Levites, the priests, the people in and around Jerusalem, and many others, even from Judah, who had joined themselves to the people of the Lord, they celebrated on the 14th day of the first month, which was the day that Moses had commanded for the celebration of the Passover. But what this tells us is that these people were ready. They had been waiting. They couldn't wait to celebrate the Passover at the completed temple together. And this is a little different than when Hezekiah, I have a note on verse 20, by the way, that said Hezekiah had to delay the Passover. But these people were ready and waiting. And then a words of wisdom there, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And it is a pretty common occurrence, is it not, that when we lose a loved one or are separated from someone or something that we love for some time, that when we get it back, it is super sweet and we cherish it and we relish and we treasure it even more than we did when we had it on a regular basis. And so this passage, this chapter is a wonderful encouragement to us. These people have been persecuted. The rebuilding of the temple had been delayed for many years, but they persisted. They persisted in faith. Haggai, Zechariah, faithful prophets encouraged the people, which is still the work of faithful pastors to this day, to encourage the people of God in their work and their lives of faithfulness and love, lived in the light of God's promises, so that other people may see in us the work of the Lord and be brought to praise the God of heaven, even as this Darius here is brought to praise the King of heaven and seek his favor as a humble supplicant to the God who has made all things. And so this chapter, it is a tremendous encouragement to us, because not only are they allowed to continue the work on the house of the Lord, but their enemies are actually turned into advocates. The king that they feared became one of their most loyal supporters and friends. And so when we as the people of God put our hearts and minds to do the Lord's work and to seek the Lord and his will, we can look forward to seeing how it is that God is going to bless us as he blessed his people in this passage. And we celebrate with them when we find the Lord's plans prospered at our hands, when we seek him in faith and serve him diligently, even, and I dare say, especially when it becomes difficult. There is so much blessing for us that we dare not stop. We dare not delay. We dare not postpone the good that we could do to another day, knowing that God, when we follow him in faith, is going to prosper and bless us every step of the way. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and a special thank you to all whose financial contributions make this ministry work. If you would like to support our podcast so that others can be blessed by the Family Bible Journey as you are, go to our website, familybiblejourney.com, where you can make a one-time contribution, or better yet, become one of our monthly sponsors. Our blessing for today. May you have a mind for action, knowing that God blesses those who go forth in faith. Amen.